of Venda, Professor Semadoda Fikeni, who is the chairperson of the Public Service Commission, senior officials from the government and public servants, senior officials from various organs of state, members of the academic community, and members of civil society, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Minister for the Public Service and Administration, as well as the Department of Public Service and Administration, I would like to briefly welcome you. It's a special occasion as we gather here in terms of the celebration of the public service at the continental level, which is going to be taking place during this upcoming weekend. This is a build-up activity where the Department of Public Service is going to lead a delegation to Addis Ababa in terms of the continental celebration. So having gathered here, we would like to appreciate the partnership that we have with the tertiary institutions, and we would like to look forward to the public lecture that our advocate is going to be presenting. And we also welcome your participation in terms of the various stakeholders who are gathered here, including those that are joining us online, Public Service and Administration. We would like to welcome you as well as the department, which is the focal point in terms of the country coordination of these activities. So we look forward to the public lecture by Advocate Mujangu Kumbi, and we really looking forward to future celebrations of this day because it's an annual event. So the partnership that we have established, and we hope that this partnership is going to endure as we move forward in terms of our country's participation in continental activities. With those words, I would like to thank you and greet you once again. Sanibonani, good morning. Dumelang. Dumelang. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sokela. I was a little bit jealous when you said Dumelang and then they agreed. Because when I said Dumelang to them, they didn't agree with that oomph. But thank you very much for your remarks. Now we know that we are in a good partnership with the department itself, and knowing very well that you are representing the minister. When the minister is accusing us of something else, we'll say, Dr. Sokela said this on that day, therefore, we are going to hold you accountable. Thank you very much, Dr. Sokela. Colleagues, we are going to get a message of support from the University of Pretoria, Stellenbosch University, by Professor Gerda van Dijk. Prof. van Dijk, while you are coming with your grand march, give her a hand of applause.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a hearty welcome to all the distinguished guests. As my colleague David, I stand on the protocols being observed, and it is my pleasure on behalf of the University of Pretoria to offer a message of support as we mark the 2025 Africa Public Service Day through this very important lecture. There is a powerful African proverb that says, on restorative justice specifically, that a child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And what does that mean in terms of restorative justice? It emphasizes that we have a community responsibility to nurture and include. It suggests that harm arises from neglect, exclusion, and broken relationships. And it says that restorative justice seeks to repair harm, restore relationships, and reintegrate rather than punish. So this lecture today commemorates a very important day on the calendar of our continent, but it is also deeply meaningful to us within the African context. Africa Public Service Day serves as a powerful platform to honor the men and the women who dedicate themselves, often under challenging circumstances, to advance for the common good. These are individuals who form the backbone of our government and institutions, shaping the policies and services that directly impact millions of lives on this continent. At the University of Pretoria, we strongly believe in transformative power, in restorative justice, in making sure that we are contributing to building a capable, ethical, and citizen-centered public service. Our academic programs in public administration, governance, policy, law, they're all designed not only to train our professionals, but rather to cultivate leaders. Leaders who are attuned to the needs of our diverse societies, that commemorate the heritage from where we come, and are committed to upholding the values, the accountability, and the service excellence that we subscribe to. This year's theme challenges us to reimagine public service for a changing Africa. We are reminded that the future of our public institutions must be shaped not only by innovation, but also by giving a place and a space and creating the brave space for restorative justice to happen. We need the deep commitment to justice and equity. In a continent where the majority of our population is under the age of 25, and where technological change is accelerating rapidly, the public service must evolve, not only to keep peace, but to lead. As a university, we take seriously our responsibility to contribute to this evolution, and we do it through our research, and we're looking at governance and how to do governance differently. We have partnerships that strengthen the link between knowledge and practice, and we want our graduates to be exposed to the public sector, to public practice, so that we gather here to listen, to learn, and to exchange ideas. Because a public service does not exist in isolation. It thrives on dialogue with communities that it serves, with the institutions like universities that support it, and with the values that the society espouses. This public lecture is one such space, a space where we can critically engage with the challenges that we face and trying to think about the future that we wish to build together. I offer the University of Pretoria support for this important initiative. Let this day serve as both a celebration and a call to action to remind us that the public service must be rooted in integrity, driven by vision, and that it is one of the most powerful tools that we have for building a better, more just Africa. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to give you a message of support.
Thank you very much, Prof. Herda. Take-home points from what she said. It is the whole question of not paying lip service, but engaging and rolling up our sleeves in order to make a better South Africa. Another take-home point also, it is the question of the involvement of universities in this regard, in terms of governance and in terms of transformation and in terms of research. Therefore, universities should not isolate themselves from the public and be seen as white elephants or as ivory towers. And universities jointly should not speak in tongues, but collectively for the betterment of the country. Thank you very much, Professor Gerda. Now we are coming to the gist of the gist. But before coming to the gist of the gist, I would like to call again Professor David Melo to come and introduce our guest. And then when I met our guest this morning, and then I said, "Good morning, Mme." And somebody said, "It is not Mme, it is advocate." And then I said, in the Free State, Mme and Ntate supersedes your title. Over to you, Ntate.
Program Director, thank you very much. I have in front of me an abbreviated CV, but I also looked at my time. I realized that this abbreviated CV, if I read it word for word, it may be like I'm reading a speech before the speech. So I'll abbreviate what has already been abbreviated, give you a summary. He spoke about the gist, give you the gist. The main anchor of the lecture today has a BProc degree and went on to study for an LLB. The BProc was from the University of Limpopo. The LLB is from the University of Wits. She went further to do a certificate in trial advocacy at the University of Texas at Austin. In terms of the professional history, she became a candidate attorney between 1984 and 1986. So by then, some of us that we call ourselves professors, we're still at primary school. And during that time, she appeared in all courts on behalf of political activists in South Africa. She then went on to become an attorney between 1987 to 1991 as a go-getter. Again, she became an advocate from 1991 until present. And as an advocate, she appeared in all courts, served in government as a lawyer still, from 1994 to 2008. And then she continued to be on the role of advocate, though she chose not to make court appearances after leaving government in 2008. She became an attorney and a project officer for the Black Lawyers Association, and that she played the role of a national secretary general between 1989 to 1990. She then also became national director of the Black Lawyers Association between 1991 and 1993, and then became an executive member of the Women's National Coalition, then became the founding trustee for Women's Development Banking Trust. Her roles and responsibilities did not end there. She became the head of the Adjudication Secretariat, Independent Electoral Commission, South Africa, for the first democratic elections in South Africa between 1993 and 1994. She was responsible for setting up dispute resolution systems and resolving electoral disputes. She became the special advisor to the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa between 1994 to 1999. And I'm sure some of you may have seen her picture more at that particular point. She became a special advisor to the President of the Republic of South Africa between 1999 to 2008. Other responsibilities as well as the experiences that she had, as I'm trying to abbreviate what was already abbreviated, she also has vast experience in as far as the higher education sector is concerned. She is a past member of Council of the Institutions of Higher Learning, including Technican Vets, the University of Limpopo. She became an ombud of the University of Johannesburg between 2018 and 2019. And she's currently a proud Chancellor of the University of Venda since 2020. But she does a lot of work with the multilateral organization as well. She became the principal negotiator at the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995. And I'm sure it's also a very important conference in the history of the emancipation of women around the world. She became the principal negotiator at the subsequent CEDAW meetings until 2008. She became the principal negotiator at the World Trade Organization, in particular at the Seattle. And then she became the principal negotiator at the UN World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, Related Intolerance in Durban in 2001. And now you can see why we actually, as the organizers, we said this is the person who can really anchor this lecture. She became a principal negotiator at the UN World Summit Sustainable Development in Johannesburg in 2002. Principal negotiator again at the UN International Conference on Financing for Development Monetary in 2002. These roles didn't end there. She became the personal representative of the president in the G8 between 2005 to 2008. And then became the personal representative of the president again in the Progressive Government Network between 2005 and 2008, and then became the consultant to UNECA to support the high-level panel on illicit financial flows, a problem that we're still having, and then became the consultant to the African Union to support the work on the HLP IFF in 2022. She, most importantly, also played various roles in peace processes in different countries. Notably, among them, the Democratic Republic of Congo between 1995 and 2008. She played a very crucial role in as far as the Kingdom of Lesotho from 1995 until present. In Iran, negotiations on nuclear disarmament from 2002 to 2008. She was also involved in the Palestine-Israel conflict. The Cote d'Ivoire from 1999 to 2010, she was also involved. The peace process in Zimbabwe from 1999 to 2020, and then the Sudan as well between 2005 to 2008. In Liberia as well, she was assisting with the relocation of President Charles Taylor. Most importantly, she also had various government responsibilities. She was appointed as one of the 3-member presidential panel to investigate the causes of an attempted insurrection in South Africa in 2021. You will remember there was South Africa was almost stabilized. She was appointed as a board member and chairperson of the South African tourism between 2021 and 2022, appointed to chair a panel of investigating irregularities at the government printing works in South Africa between 2021 to 2022. She is also serving on a number of boards, company boards, and organizations that are giving people who are needy. So now you understand why we actually chased her and said, please come and give us this lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, join me as I welcome Advocate Mujanku Gumbi. So I'm using the 2 titles. Thank you very much. Welcome on stage and give us the lecture. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Most of that he got on the internet, and don't trust the internet, but brings back many memories. Well, I know you are not supposed to interfere with the flag, but I can't see the people this side. The flag is in the way. Organizers, is there anything that you can do without offending the government? Maybe here. Thank you. Thank you very much. I always want to see people's faces when I talk. Program Director, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we started off late, so let me stand on the protocol that has already been observed. And I must just say it's good to see Prof. Somadoda Fikeni after a while. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this discussion on this important matter, a matter where we interrogate how we clean up our festering wounds in order to allow for the healing to begin. I was asked this morning, I said to Professor Mello, I was asked to speak about restorative justice and reparatory justice, and other people will speak about the public service. I don't want to step on people's toes. I have titled this lecture, A Race Against Erasure. A race against erasure. Because I constantly ask myself, who am I really? Where do I come from? Is it true that I originate from West Africa or West Central Africa and came southward about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago? But what about the mysteries that were hidden deep within the caves in the cradle of humankind, which bear evidence that points us to the truth that we are standing where men originated? The oldest evidence found in those caves date back 3 million years ago or more. Evidence that now openly speaks about a community that lived, a community that loved, a community that bore children, a community that regulated itself. I asked myself, what language did they speak? What songs did they sing? What food did they eat? How did they bury their dead? What gods did they worship? What did they teach their children? The Olduvai Gorge in Ngorongoro in Tanzania tools over 2 million years ago. These are just but glimpses of who we are that come to light here and there. They come to light in the lost and found cities in the northern parts of South Africa and in Zimbabwe. The great Zimbabwe ruins tell us of a city that was a great trading post. Information that is currently available tells us that the city was inhabited from 1,000 years after death. That far back, that's when we existed in Zimbabwe. Archaeological findings such as those of the Kingdom of Mapumbugwe, the ancient towns of Tulamela, Zata, where Africans were dancing the famous Domba dance to the beat of the holy drum, tell us a different story from what the plunderers of Africa want us to believe. Further afield, the Timbuktu manuscripts dating back to the 13th century stand as a testament to an outstanding African intellectual heritage. They cover a wide range of subjects, including medicine, astronomy, law, literature, philosophy, and other sciences. There are many questions outstanding still. What did we call our places of abode before the colonialists arrived? When the Batswana called their mother Ma, was it always the word they used? Is the word Ma borrowed from the Spanish, Italian, German word for mother? Or is it the other way around, that they borrowed from our ancient languages? My soul wanders, seeking answers. History, as we know, is at best partly documented, mostly written with bias, or not recorded at all. The African proverb that says, until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter, embodies this truth. As I have said, I've been asked to talk about reparatory justice in South Africa. I will try to go a little bit beyond South Africa because we are at a university and hosted by a number of universities, but mindful of the time constraints. I will inquire into this matter in 3 parts. First, address the question that is usually put forward when dealing with reparations. What is the harm that was visited upon us as people of color? What is that harm that seeks redress through reparatory justice? I will thereafter interrogate the responses that are under consideration by the African Union and the United Nations, as well as examples of reparations elsewhere. And lastly, I will explore other possible remedies that may assist us to redress the harm that was caused to us in a holistic manner. So we ask ourselves, what is the harm that was caused to us? It is not possible to discuss in one sitting the harm that was caused to nations by the many acts of dispossession, in particular through the transatlantic slave trade, who tell us that they did not take our land, but only put their markers on our land. Their markers, they use white stones and crosses to demarcate their territory. That, they tell us, does not amount to taking our land. The Portuguese were followed by the French, the British, the Dutch, as you know. And the Dutch tell us that 100 of their men landed in Cape Town in 3 ships on the 6th of April, 1652. Both the Dutch and the English proceeded to unleash a genocidal reign of terror on Africans as they moved from what they called the Cape into the interior of present-day South Africa. As they plundered and killed, they killed our names as well. Cape Town, Grahamstown, Port Elizabeth, Queenstown, Durban, Bloemfontein, Pretoria, Pietersburg, Nelspruit, Kimberley, they named our places, including bastardizing the ones that they attempted to keep, such as changing Mahiken to Mefking. In the process, we lost our personal names as well. Nelson, Oliver, Johannes, Elizabeth, Lillian, Charlotte, Victoria, Sarah, Jan, Peter became our new names. On their part, to date, although they claim some African ancestry, they have not adopted our names still. They erased our belief systems, calling us pagans. Our education systems vanished. Our way of life, our very identity were lost to us. The 100 Dutch men arrived without women partners and unleashed a grotesque attack on the sexual and reproductive integrity of indigenous populations. What is it that we want to repair? How do you repair the erasure of our identity? We lost our land, our names, our customs, our religion, our dress, our education systems, including the practice of oral history and storytelling, our legal systems, our whole being. That is the harm that we need to repair. And these colonial atrocities were spread throughout Africa and other parts of the world. The slave castles of Gorée in Senegal and the Gold Coast in Ghana bear the marks of the inhumanity of the slave trade. Human feces from these years form the smooth patina that you now walk upon in those castles. The narrow doors of no return remind us that there really was no return. Patrice Lumumba's only remaining body part, his tooth, has just recently been brought home to Congo. And thousands in the Congo had their limbs cut off. The National Museum of Ethnology in Lisbon, Portugal, has an ongoing exhibition titled Deconstructing Colonialism, Decolonizing the Imaginary. This exhibition shows the colonial atrocities of the Portuguese in Mozambique and their other colonies. Among the other documents on exhibition now, as we speak in Lisbon, there are records of how they classified blacks as primitive, incapable of rational thought, with no idea of statecraft, no advanced skills, believed in no religion, but were partial to spells, had no history. They said we have no history. And biologically, we resembled the great apes. The genocidal massacres of over 1 million Algerians, a third of the total population then, by the French colonialists, remain etched in our memory. This is the harm that we have to address. The horrors of the transatlantic slave trade have been written about quite extensively. How do we even begin to try and understand the harm caused by the brutality of the capture, the horrors of the transportation, chattel slavery, where the totality of humanity is wiped out and you become property, the brutality on the cotton fields, the rapes, both physical and spiritual, this mental, spiritual, and physical healing is immense. South Africa has a very limited direct reparatory justice history. The Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act provided for reparations of victims of apartheid. These reparations were limited to people who made statements or were referred to in the proceedings of the TRC and were formally recognized as victims, which in itself was a huge limitation because we know that every aspect of Black lives was negatively impacted by apartheid. The Reparations and Rehabilitation Committee was mandated to make recommendations for reparations, which reparations were not limited to monetary compensation. Fortunately for us, and we have representatives from the Department of Justice here, fortunately for us, the reparation process remains open, giving us an opportunity to learn from other experiences. South Africa, however, has complexities because the reparations program in South Africa is linked to apartheid. And those who were responsible and continue to benefit from apartheid are now inextricably interlinked and integrated into the current economic and political classes. In truth, some are part of our government. How do we ask for reparations against them? I have earlier spoken about the harm that was caused to South Africans long before the advent of apartheid. That part still awaits redress and is outstanding. This year, 2025, marks the 60th anniversary of the adoption of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination has taken up the responsibility of drafting a general recommendation that all member states should use in determining what reparatory justice measures are appropriate. I should mention that at the last sitting of the committee in April this year, South Africa, which had the honor to host the first United Nations Conference against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerances, had not made its submission. The committee is quite disappointed that South Africa has not made any submissions, I must say. Because the general recommendation that's going to come out of this committee will address reparations for all historical injustices, from the chattel enslavement of Africans, particularly the forced capture, transatlantic transport, the enslavement, and massive and continuing harm suffered by their descendants. Brazil made a very telling input at the sitting of the committee in April this year. They stated that the fight against racism, discrimination, xenophobia, and related forms of intolerance is a priority for Brazilian foreign policy. Not only does the Federative Republic of Brazil govern its international relations by repudiating racism, but it also considers the practice of racism to be an unbailable and imprescriptible crime. Brazil says that sustainable development, which includes the eradication of poverty in all its forms and dimensions, the fight against inequalities, the preservation of the planet, economic growth, and the promotion of social inclusion, in this sense, must not fail to consider aspects related to racial issues in its formulations. The United Nations Special Advisor on Africa, Christina Duarte, writes in May this year that reparations are often discussed exclusively in terms of the past: slavery, colonial exploitation, violent occupation, and cultural pillage. These were monumental crimes, and the demand for justice for these wrongs is not negotiable. However, focusing solely on history without interrogating today's systemic injustices misses a vital truth, she says. And that truth is that the past wrongs were not buried. They were transformed into today's economic and political systems. Close quote. As we've already heard, the AU this year adopted the theme Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations. The objectives of this declaration are set out in detail, and I have them in my lecture, but I will not go through all of them in detail. But they include strengthening AU frameworks, operationalizing reparations as a flagship project, developing an African common position, mainstreaming reparations into development policies, and so on. As is clear from the breadth of the objectives, the African Union has set itself a very detailed agenda, and I hope they keep to it. The decision to declare 2025 as such to be the year of reparations was preceded by a number of activities. One of them is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights meeting in Banjul in 2022, which affirmed that accountability and redress for legacies of the past, including enslavement, the trade and trafficking of enslaved Africans, colonialism, and racial segregation, is integral to combating systemic racism and to the advancement of the human rights of Africans and people of African descent. And the Commission, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, called on all member states, that includes South Africa, to establish a committee to consult, seek the truth, and conceptualize reparations from Africa's perspective, describe the harm occasioned by the tragedies of the past, establish a case for reparations, and pursue justice for trade and trafficking in enslaved Africans, colonialism, and colonial crimes. This is a decision of the African Commission. Another activity was an international conference that was held in Accra in November 2023, which also affirmed that the fulfillment of reparations is a moral as well as a legal imperative rooted in principles of justice, human rights, and human dignity. And the claim for reparations represent a concrete step towards remedying historical wrongs and fostering healing among the people of Africa and people of African descent. That conference is the one that influenced the African Union to declare 2025 as the year of reparations. Their decisions are also included in the talk, and I will leave them for now. Reparatory justice is not a new concept. It is a practice that has been and is in an integral last 3 centuries. First off were the French, who imposed racist reparations on the former slaves in Haiti as far back as 1885. One of the leading reporters of the National Public Radio in the US, Greg Rosalsky, puts it like this: Haiti is one of the poorest nations in the world, and rich countries have their fingerprints all over the nation's stunted development. The United States worked to isolate a newly independent Haiti during the early 19th century and violently occupied the island for 19 years in the early 20th century. While the US officially left Haiti in 1934, it continued to control Haiti's public finances until 1947, siphoning away around 40% of Haiti's national income to service debt repayments to the US and France. Much of this debt to France was the legacy of what the Virginia scholar Marlene Dowd calls the greatest heist in history. So reparations are known to nations. They forced the freed slaves of Haiti to pay reparations for freeing themselves from slavery. It is Marlene Dowd in her article titled All the Devils Are Here, how the visual history of the Haitian Revolution misrepresents Black suffering and death. Marlene Dowd in that article warns us to look out for narratives that portray Blacks as violent and whites as victims of that violence, when in fact Blacks were responding to the violence perpetrated against them over years. This lesson from Marlene Dowd is a lesson not lost on us as we observe the situation between Palestine and Israel. Reparations were paid also by many countries after both the First and the Second World Wars. One of the most comprehensive reparation programs was the one undertaken by Germany in respect of the Holocaust victims. There is a report that I've set out in full in my lecture by the United States, where they reported to the Congress in the US on the reparations to Holocaust victims. This report was released in 2020, July 2020. Most comprehensive. Just the introduction to that report says, Germany has taken commendable steps to confront its role as a perpetrator of the Holocaust and to ensure that Holocaust victims and their heirs receive restitution and or compensation. Germany also honors and remembers the victims of the Holocaust and has worked to cultivate a culture of remembrance. Its restitution measures range from compensating former owners and heirs for assets wrongfully seized during the Holocaust to making substantial financial contribution to victims' funds and survivors' pension. This is in 2020, just now. The United States is reporting on this program. They say from 1945 to 2018, the German government paid approximately 86.8 billion US dollars in restitution and compensation to Holocaust victims and their heirs. Germany has also identified Nazi-looted objects, including artworks, books, and objects within larger collections, and has returned 16,000 objects to survivors and their heirs over the last 20 years. The British Crown still has the diamond from right here in Pretoria, one of our biggest diamonds ever. Germany has returned over 16,000 objects to survivors and heirs of the Holocaust. Thousands more pieces of looted art are still missing worldwide. Rising anti-Semitism throughout Europe, including Germany, especially in the former East Germany, coupled with polls showing the need to increase Holocaust education among Germany's youth, highlight the importance of Germany's continued dedication to fostering a culture of remembrance. So, Germany has paid over 86.8 billion US dollars in reparations. And they have identified them in detail, what reparations have to be paid. There are many, many that are listed in this report, and I would urge you to read it. I'm not going to go through it, all of it, including American Jewish and cultural property archives that have been returned, the most detailed education, remembrance, research, memorial sites, all of that is known to people who talk about reparations. They know what needs to be done. And as I said, I'm happy that South Africa still has unfinished business arising from the TRC. There are even US citizens' claim against the German reparation fund. However, it is the same Germany that has just recently acknowledged that what it did in Namibia amounts to genocide. But it is again the same Germany that has refused to apologize and agree to reparations for its actions in Namibia. The same Germany that is continuing to this day to pay Holocaust victims. The monster of racism rears its head again. I have titled this lecture, A Race Against Erasure. There are many who say that African countries should have now pulled themselves out of poverty. They refer to successes such as those in Singapore. I do not subscribe to this position. First, why should we forego what is rightfully ours? It is very easy for the beneficiaries of slavery, of colonialism, of apartheid to seek to put us on the defensive in order to deflect from what needs to be done. We must not allow that. Secondly, I do not subscribe to this because countries such as Singapore did not develop depending on their own capacities. The United States and its ally, in particular Israel, backed the development of Singapore with resources and political cover. Singapore is not a miracle. It is what happens when a major superpower determines that it is in its national security interest to develop certain countries. And that's what America does. It is true that there are instances where we could have done better in service to our communities. I realize that this lecture is co-hosted by the South African Department for Public Service and Administration. Many in this country are asking whether there is a public service to talk about in this country. We watch with dismay as many public services disintegrate around us. Not because we don't have budgets, not because we don't have funds, but because some of our leaders have decided that the public service is there to feed their stomachs. Some of our politicians and public servants are spitting on the graves of the young martyrs who died 49 years ago yesterday. Shame on all of you who continuously desecrate the memories of those gallant young heroes. It is of great concern that some of those on this corruption-feeding frenzy were in fact in the trenches with those who died. Have you no shame, really? But be that as it may, the demand for reparations is not a call for favors to be extended to the victims. It is about accountability. As we have seen with the Holocaust reparations and other forms of reparation, there are many ways of determining what kind of reparations are appropriate in respect of the different forms of harm caused. Cases such as Haiti present a relatively easy case because we can calculate what was paid. More recently, the American city of Tulsa in Oklahoma has been able to quantify the amount of reparations due to the descendants of the Tulsa massacre. You would not know, but I think some of you know that during the course of 18 terrible hours on May 31 and June 1, 1921, more than 1,000 homes and businesses were destroyed, while credible estimates of deaths range from 50 to 300 when the white KKK in the US descended on the black area in Tulsa. They murdered hundreds and hundreds of black residents and burned businesses and homes to the ground in an attack that was so racist and transcended mere mob violence. The city, now under a new mayor, is preparing to award its black community $105 million reparation to address the harms caused by this massacre. More than 100 years later, but better late than never. Also in the US, in 2021, Evanston in Illinois became the first US city to implement a reparation program specifically for Black residents who were affected by discriminatory housing policies. So the work that the AU and the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is doing will hopefully add substantively to answering the questions: what kind of reparations will deal holistically with the harms caused to Africans? What kind of reparations will deal holistically with the harm caused